Let me show you how to get these suckers out. In this episode of Aston1936.com, I'm going to show you how to remove the O2 sensors from the V12 engine like the one in my 2005 DB9. So O2 sensors are also known as Lamda sensors or HEGOs, and they're all the same thing. They're just known by different names to some people. So our cars actually have 8 O2 sensors in them. And in other videos I've already talked about where we have 4 primary catalytic converters, 4 primary catalysts in our V12 engines, and we have an upstream O2 sensor and a downstream O2 sensor around each catalyst in the exhaust flow. So these are an integral part of the fuel and emission control systems in the car. But this video isn't going to be about diagnosing whether you have a failing O2 sensor. I'm just going to be focused on how you actually remove these things. I'm going to do the install in a separate video, but this video is going to be dedicated to getting all 8 of these things out of my car. So just to note, in another video on how to inspect the primary catalyst, where I actually go in with a bore scope through the O2 sensor hole, I can show you how to remove the O2 sensor without having to undo the electrical connector. So if you just need to pull these out of the exhaust manifolds to get a camera in to see the top of the catalyst, check out my other video on how to do that. The way it works is it's got its own self-contained light, and I'm basically just starting to aim it down into the chamber. I missed. And there you go. You can start to see our matrix that's in there. So as I said, I'm going to be showing you how to get the whole thing out of the car. And part of that means then we have to disconnect the electrical connection side. So one of the prerequisites that's a real bear for this task is to get the upstream O2 sensors, electrical connections. We have to remove the engine wiring harness top cover. So this is a plastic cover that basically sits over top the wiring harness where this electrical connection is going to be hidden behind. So you'll have to get these out. Warning, these things are going to break when you take them out. They are plastic and they've been baking in the engine compartment, and all the plastic tabs that hold them in place are probably going to snap off as you remove it. So if you're getting in to change an upstream catalyst O2 sensor, you should already order yourself a set of these. So you can check out my other video on how to remove these. I'll have a link to it up here. All right, so let's get on with taking these out of the car. As I said, I'm going to be taking out all 8. So if you're just doing one of them, I suggest that you skip forward in the video, just look at the chapter definitions here on the YouTube screen and find the sensor in particular that you're interested in. I'm doing all 8 of them separately. The technique's kind of the same, just the challenges vary a little from sensor to sensor. So with a little patience and the right tools, you'll be able to get this done. So let's cover those tools now. So here's pretty much all we need to get all the different O2 sensors out. You need a bendy head 3/8 ratchet. It's a fairly long handle. Some of these things are going to be difficult to break loose. The bendy head is certainly an advantage working in some of the weird spaces and places that we're going to have to do the work from. I'll have links to this down in the comment section below. You also need a selection of extensions. So I have a 12-inch and a couple of 6 inches. You could just use a couple of 6 inches, but you're definitely going to need a few extensions to get the work done. The star of the show is you should really invest in one of these O2 sensor sockets, and you can see these have a slot that allow you to get in over top the wire and still make the connection down to the 7/8 inch or 22 millimeter O2 sensor. So this one's from Tecton. I'll have a link to it down also in the comments. So it's very difficult if you don't have one of these, so I highly recommend it. And as always, you're going to need your trusty inspection light, and a couple of shop rags will always help out. So we have a few prerequisites to get out of the way before we can get to the O2 sensors. Obviously, we need to get the car jacked up off the ground, up on a jack stand. We're going to remove the road wheel, and then we're going to remove the inner fender liner, and I'll have links to videos that show you how to do all those steps up here. The other thing I've already mentioned is we're going to have removed the engine wiring harness top cover if you're doing the primary upstream O2 sensors. If you're only going after the downstream O2 sensors, you do not have to remove these, this engine electrical wiring harness cover thing, which sits up in this area. So with all that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started on removing the left-hand side upstream O2 sensors. And I happen to have my intake manifolds removed right now, so we're going to be able to get some better footage than you would normally if you were just looking through this little hole. So we're going to do actually all the mechanical work through this space right here. And so let me show you really quick where the electrical connectors for the O2 sensors are. So down here we can see this is the rear engine cylinders 10, 11, 12 upstream O2 sensor. And then this one over here is the cylinder 7, 8, 9 upstream O2 sensor. Both of their wiring harnesses come up, and here is this engine wiring harness tray that we've removed the cover from already so that we can see where these wires go. And they slip up into here, and then we can see the electrical connections, these green connectors up here where the wires themselves plug in. And then the white wires that you can see here are kind of woven around the water hose and potentially around the PCV fresh air return pipe. So we're going to get in here and we're going to get these electrical connections undone as the first step. So we can see the two green electrical connectors. So this is the rearmost connector, and this actually is also the rearmost O2 sensor. So if you forget which one connects to which, the rear electrical connection for the harness is the one for cylinders 10, 11, 12. And up further, we have the electrical connection for cylinders 7, 8, 9. So to disconnect these sensors, it's pretty straightforward. To make room for the camera while I'm doing this, essentially there's a little tab. I'm just going to show you with the screwdriver. You push that in, and then you separate the sensor housing. So I found it's actually pretty easy. If you've got only one way to get one hand in here, I can use my thumb to push the tab, and then I'm twisting the screwdriver blade to start pulling the sensor back, and then that separates easily. And to get the front one, so here we're doing the same thing except I'm using two screwdrivers, and I'm pushing the tab with the first one and twisting with the second. And there we go. And with a little luck, I've got that pulled loose. And now I've got both those wiring tails loose, and I can work on disconnecting the actual O2 sensors from the manifold. So cameraman Rob is now hoverman Rob, and so I'm going to get in there with a long extension and the special socket and my bendy head ratchet, and let's get the 10, 11, 12 sensor out first. So in my car, I just have to crack them loose like that. And so that's started. So let's put our tools together. So you're definitely going to use a variety of extensions. So I know for the one we're doing here, which is actually the rearward O2 sensor for 10, 11, 12, I need about an 18-inch extension, works pretty well. And then I have my ratchet here. So we're going to take this assembly, and essentially there's the slot so I can slip over the wire and then over the sensor itself, and I can get the socket to engage. And my experience has been, so there's very limited amount of rotation that I can get, but I found that if it just breaks loose, it's been finger loose the rest of the way. So I'm going to just try and crack it loose here. There we go. And so I'm going to take the socket off, and now I'm going to do the rest by hand. And now with a little luck, I found that there's about 3 turns to get them loose. And then we have to carefully tease out the electrical connection. I sort of flexed out the rubber hose, and that's the first one removed.
With that one out of the way.
So with that one out of the way, I can now go after the cylinder 789. And I'm using the long extension again and the bendy head ratchet. I'm just going to crack it loose. There we go. So for the front sensor, I can do that with just the 12-inch extension only. And I can slip that on. Again, I just need to crack it loose, hopefully. And might take the wiring harness out just to make it easier. Again, 3 turns. There we go. So that's 789 removed. So here we are down on the secondary bank. So this is the left-hand side, and the suspension is back this way. And you can just get your head in here and look in to see the cylinder 789 downstream O2 sensor and the 10, 11, 12 downstream O2 sensor. These pipes, this is basically the exhaust pipe running about here. And then if we follow the wires up, we can actually see this 789 one goes into an actual shielded snap foil cover that we're going to open up. And then the 10, 11, 12 one disappears here, but they're just like the green ones from the Upstream ones. They're just blue this time around. So to start with, I'm going to try to disconnect the electrical, and I've got my hands in here, and I'm just going to open these snaps up so that I can actually expose the electrical connector for 789. And I just basically push the tab and pull down the sensor, and that one's disconnected. So that's the easy one. A little bit harder to see is the 10, 11, 12 connector. It's tucked up behind an engine block sensor that's there, but we can just get up there with our fingertips and we'll disconnect that. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get a great camera view while I'm doing that, but you get the idea. Just get your fingers up there. You might combine and maybe using a screwdriver to push the tab while you use one hand to tug it back down, but let's give it a shot here. There we go. And note the routing of this one goes behind the hard pipe that's here to keep it out of as far away from the exhaust manifold as possible. So now I've got the electrical for both disconnected. Let's go after getting these O2 sensors themselves loosened up. So the process for these is pretty straightforward. We don't need to use any of the extensions. We're just going to slip the special socket on and get our bendy head ratchet into place and crack it loose. Then now the keen observer is going to realize, well, how exactly is it getting that right hand in there? I have my lower under tray off right now, which I think is probably going to be essential if you're taking off the downstream sensors. So that's the 789 sensor removed. So next we're going to do the exact same technique, reaching through and getting on the 10, 11, 12. Crack it loose. And we just spin this one out as well. And I've been lucky, mine are able to be finger loosened once I get them out. So that's it for the two downstreams on the left-hand side. Let's go over and do the upstreams on the passenger side. So over here on the right-hand side, we're going to work on the primary bank cylinders, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so you can see better, I happen to be doing my plug and coil pack change, so I have my intake manifold removed here as well. I've got my cross brace off, so we can actually get some camera shots. Otherwise, it would have been almost impossible to show you what we're doing. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get in and remove the electrical connectors like we did on the other side. So I would be reaching up in through this little tiny space and getting my hand in here. But here are the same two connectors. The forward one is for cylinders 1, 2, 3. The rearward one is for cylinders 4, 5, 6. So same approach. We're going to get in here. You'll probably find that it's easier to maybe use screwdrivers or your fingers. So I'm going to basically push the tab in with one, and I'm going to pry the sensor loose with the other. This one's going to be the more challenging one if you're working with your hands coming from this side. The same approach, to push the tab in and separate it like that. So the next problem, which is a new one, is you can see that the wires for the sensors are trapped behind the fresh air inlet pipes for the positive crankcase ventilation PCV system, because they probably hooked up the electrical connections first as they were assembling the engine and then layered these on afterwards. So to get these cables back out, we're kind of screwed because we can't get behind the pipes. So you have a couple of options here. If you're replacing this sensor, you could get in here and just cut it off with a pair of snippers. Of course, you're destroying the sensor for good, but if you're going to throw it away anyways, just cut it off and pull the cable down. Or if you have some way of getting access, you can release these clips that hold these hard pipes in place. These are friction clips, so I got on here and I tugged it back and it released it from its tab inside, and I pulled this one back and released it, and that gives these pipes a little bit of play. And my whole reasoning for doing that is so that hopefully I can get in here and tuck So I popped that forward one out, and then I've got the 4, 5, 6 one trapped in here. Same challenge. And for that one, basically I bit the bullet, and I also released the front clip. These two are actually ones you can get at fairly reasonably through the hole in the fender well. Okay, so with the wires disconnected now, we can get on to actually removing the sensors themselves. These are going to require a combination of different extensions and our bendy head ratchet. So I'm going to start by going after the front one for cylinders 1, 2, 3. And I'm using the 18 or the 12-inch and a 6-inch extension so I can get up here. Okay, so that one's loose. To do the front one, I'm using a 12-inch extension, and we're probably going to rely on the bendy head of this ratchet a little bit. But I'm going to basically angle fit it in through here. There we go. So I'm attached onto the sensor. And if you come in and look through the top here, you can see where the end of my extension. My extension is right here. And now if I get down in here with my bendy head, connected, there you go. So this joint's kind of bent, and I'm using my hand here to brace the pivot point. And now, again, all we have to do is crack it loose. There we go.
And we can then set what it looks like when we're doing it with the manifold in place.
Mm-hmm. To get this one, we're just going to go with the socket directly on. I'm going to have to keep this hand in there. So the other one we're going to go at, I'm just going to show you real quick now too. We're not going to use any extension. And I would suggest you probably take that front one out first just so it's out of the way. Basically, I hand installed that, and now I'm going to get my ratchet in. All right, so I've attached my ratchet head, and again, all I'm going to do is just try and crack it loose. There we go. And 3 revolutions, and this guy is out. So let's head underneath the car to get the downstream ones. So over here on the right-hand side, we can access the downstream sensors for the primary bank. And I'll grab the camera here and show you actually where I'm going in through. So basically there's a little gap between the frame rail and the suspension where we can just look in there and we can see our sensors. We're going to start the same way. My goal is to get the electrical connections undone first. And you can see the starter body there, that's the gold item. Then the lower connection is the one for the forward cylinders. So that's cylinders 1, 2, 3. And the one connection that's up higher on the starter's body is the 4, 5, 6. So these are the same type of connectors. And I should be able to do this with one hand for the camera. And just squeeze and pull that one down. And then probably just outside the camera, I'm just squeezing and pulling that sensor down too. So I've got both those connectors undone, and now we can focus our attention over here on the actual O2 sensors themselves. So getting these undone is pretty much the same. We don't need any extension. We're just going to come in here, fit our special socket. Now on my car, this one's been pretty stiff. So we'll fast forward through getting it loose. And there's that sensor out. Now the rear one's a little trickier just because they have it sort of tipped away. And this is why the bendy head is a good tool for this scenario. And this one's finger loose, thank God. And that's that one. Well, now we have our bounty of O2 sensors removed. As I was taking them out, I was taking time and I was using a Sharpie and I was writing which cylinders they were protecting on them just in case I need to put them back or I want to do some sort of forensic consideration. So now you can get on with whatever you had planned next for after taking out your O2 sensors. Perhaps you were replacing them or doing something else, but you can move forward with your project. Now I'm going to have a video coming up on how to properly reinstall these. There's definitely some tips and tricks on how to get them back into the car properly, so please check that out. Up here you'll probably find my next video is actually going to be on alternate O2 sensors. So instead of buying the original Aston ones, I can probably save you a giant bucket of money by suggesting an alternative. So go ahead and check that out. Down here you'll find my companion blog article, which will have links to some of the processes and tools and other things, and maybe a bit of the technique I've talked about here today. If you like getting videos like this, please go ahead and subscribe down here. You'll get automatically notified when another video comes out. And as always, I love to hear your comments. Please leave those down below. Feel free to tell me how crazy I am for doing all this. Thanks for watching.